Hello, I'm Brenton Simons, President and CEO of American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society, and welcome to the Antiquarto, an occasional conversation series produced by our society, today serving almost 400,000 members in 139 countries, primarily through our website, americanancestors.org, which features 1.4 billion records, and also through online and in-person programs, publications, and through many other means. Today I have as my very special guest, and a good friend too, I might add, the director of Pilgrim Hall Museum, Dr. Donna Curtin. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Donna for several years and working together between our two institutions and also serving on a state commission together. And we're delighted to have you here, Donna. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be joining you for this conversation, Brenton. I've been looking forward to it.
Yes, yes. Well, I think Pilgrim Hall is one of the great museums, and it's one of the oldest museums in the country too. But it's such a great place to visit. And for our viewers who have never been there, can you say something about its history and what your collections include?
Well, Pilgrim Hall Museum makes the claim of being the oldest continuous public museum in the United States. Now, there were earlier museums, but they have not continued and survived. So it truly is a remarkable institution. It's this, I like to think of it as a granite temple to history located right in the center of historic Plymouth, a beautiful seaside community here in New England. And for 200 years, the mission has been to preserve the history of this very special place, in some ways unique in our popular understandings of the beginnings of New England. The Pilgrims in Plymouth, of course, loom large, I think, in our childhood imaginations especially. But the institution has an extraordinary collection, both of archives and documents, but also artifacts and objects, some of which go back to the passengers on the Mayflower and are attributed to belonging to them, being used by them, and some of them actually carried on that vessel from the old world to the new world.
What are the most special objects from that collection?
Well, one of the documents that we have is actually the oldest surviving state document in all of New England. And that is the patent that the Pilgrims had to seek to give them permission from English authorities to be here in Plymouth, because when they first set sail on their voyage, they weren't intending to come here. They were thinking of going further south to the area of Northern Virginia colony. And when they missed the mark and ended up settling here in Plymouth, they needed to seek this new document to allow them to establish a colony. So there's a lot of very interesting history embedded in these early patents and charters, and that is one of the documents that I think is truly a very special one in our collection. But some of the objects themselves are really so striking because they are so ordinary and humble. And two of them come to mind. One is this little 6-board chest, just rough hewn wood, just nailed together. It's not even joined. It's not a fine piece of furniture. And that descended in the family of Elder William Brewster, who was the spiritual leader of Plymouth Colony, and dates from the 17th century, is made of European wood, came from Holland. With him is our identification of this piece, and would have carried those objects that he needed to establish his family here, including, for someone like Elder William Brewster, some books, as these were really important. And we have some of those books as well. And the other object that really, I think, speaks to a lot of people, because Plymouth Colony was settled by families, and women and children were among the passengers who came here. 3 of those women were pregnant during the Atlantic crossing. And one of them, Susanna White, brought this very fragile woven willow osier cradle from Holland to her new home here in Plymouth Colony. And that has survived 400 years and is truly a wonderful highlight of the collection.
Those are really amazing American treasures. And I love some of your chairs. You have Governor Bradford's chair, and do you have John Carver's chair as well?
Well, the Carver chair is an interesting chair. So some of these chairs come with stories, and over time, as the museum has evolved and different ways of analyzing and understanding these objects have come to the fore, we've learned new things. So the chair that was for many years attributed to John Carver, when it was in more recent times analyzed scientifically, proved to be uh, not of European species of wood. So therefore, it could not have been brought over on the Mayflower. It was made here in America. And as we know that John Carver died early in the colony's history in the spring of 1621, this is not his chair. He would not have had time surviving the first winter to have had a chair made for himself. So the story of who actually owned that chair, it is a very early piece of American made furniture. And that is also the case with Governor Bradford's chair. Now, that chair was made here early, one of the earliest pieces of American decorative arts in existence, and descended in his family through a wonderfully documented provenance, and is believed to have been Governor Bradford's chair, and is a very proudly displayed in the main hall of our almost 200-year-old museum building.
Well, as a personal aside, I had a copy of that chair made, as you know, and it resides at New England Historic Genealogical Society, so that our visitors can have a little taste of treasures that await them at Pilgrim Hall. When I visited you last, you have a wonderful tapestry underway. Tell us about that.
Well, as part of our ongoing museum enterprise, we want to find new ways of telling the story of Plymouth Colony in all of its complexity, and especially with attention, equal attention, balanced approach to telling the Indigenous history as well as the English colonial history. So we were looking for sort of a new medium. We have wonderful paintings, we have artworks, we have exhibits, we have labels, we have the furnishings on display. But we decided that an heirloom embroidery, and this was very much inspired by the 1,000-year-old Bayeux Tapestry, which is still in existence and was created 1,000 years ago to tell the story of the Norman conquest of England, that might be a really a great legacy approach to trying to tell the story of Plymouth Colony. So we enlisted the aid of a remarkable master embroiderer who happens to live here in our little town of Plymouth. She is an artist, and she works with a group of advisors, including Plymouth historian James Baker. We get some advice sometimes from Dr. Jeremy Bangs on Dutch, all things Dutch, and Linda Coombs at Wampanoag, Aquina Wampanoag, advisor and educator. And they help advise the artist on how to tell the story visually. But then it is all stitched by hand in needlework. We have 20 chapters of the story that will be told, and each one is 6 feet long. And it's this just amazing needleworked scene. Right now, they're stitching the departure of the Pilgrims from England to Holland when they were betrayed and taken prisoner to prison in Boston and Lincolnshire. And their attempt to leave their homeland was temporarily thwarted. And this scene, according to Bradford's journal, takes place at night. So the stitchers call it the night scene. And all of the embroidery is done in shades of blue and gray. So it looks like it's taking place at night. And you can see the moonlight reflecting on the water in the harbor. And it's just amazingly beautiful.
Well, it is a really beautiful piece, and how forward-thinking of you to commission something that artisans can create, telling these stories, and it really is something that everyone should have a look at. You've had some big announcements this spring, and I'm thinking in March, you had an announcement with regard to discoveries on a very early vessel.
Yes, among the treasures of the museum is this very curious artifact. They look like dinosaur bones. They're these old gnarled timbers. There's 109 of them, and they have been in the collection of the museum since 1889. And they are the remains of a shipwreck that was discovered during the Civil War off the coast of Cape Cod in the area of where Orleans and Chatham are now, in this old sort of covered over marsh. A storm ripped it open, exposed the shipwreck, and it ended up coming to the museum. And the story that has accompanied this artifact has been that it was the vessel that William Bradford describes having shipwrecked down on the Cape in 1626, a little vessel that was carrying a group of Irish servants and a couple of others on their way down to Virginia to plant tobacco. And they shipwreck here and end up spending almost a year in Plymouth Colony, a very sort of unlikely, coming together of this very different group of people here in Plymouth. But so we wanted to see if we could ascertain whether or not that story had any scientific truth behind it. And we had a wonderful group of internationally known maritime experts, including Fred Hawker from the Vasa Museum in Stockholm, Aoife Daly from the University of Copenhagen Saxo Institute, and others who examine these timbers through the methods available today, dendrochronology and some radiocarbon work. And they were able to tell us that indeed it could well be that vessel. We may not ever know for certain because they didn't inscribe the name on the timbers, but it is a ship that includes wood from both the early 17th century and even earlier, the late 16th century. So if it came over in 1626, it's just kind of the old rickety ship. You could see a bunch of Irish servants indenturing themselves and coming over and taking this tremendous risk to cross the Atlantic Ocean, seeking to better their lives. So the story is that the story that we inherited and the information we've received from the scientific analysis are brought much more closely together. And we feel that this is probably the best indication that we have. This could indeed be the vessel that Bradford describes.
Well, that's just remarkable. And it goes to show you how new discoveries are being made all the time, how people don't believe that Pilgrim history and the history of that period is alive, and it really is. And your work on that shows it. Earlier, you mentioned Linda Coombs, who's a Native American historian, a part of the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribe. We just honored her with our Preservation and History Award at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. But that leads me to ask, what are the ways in which you're working with the tribes in interpreting Native American history?
Well, I think you're right to point to, this revival of interest, that history is not, just a dusty thing on the shelf. There's a tremendous amount of engagement happening, and especially through Indigenous perspectives and new Indigenous scholarship. It's very exciting, and we embrace that at Pilgrim Hall Museum and have been attempting to do so for a number of years. And I think a real turning point for us was just before the pandemic in 2018, we worked with Linda Coombs and also other members of the Wampanoag tribe on an exhibition called Wampanoag World, where we really wanted to try to say, we are Pilgrim Hall Museum, and we've been telling the story of the Pilgrims for about 200 years, but we are listening to Indigenous historians and educators, and we have received the message that we can't understand that history without understanding the history of the Wampanoag people and looking at these things in tandem, in a balanced way together. We need to incorporate Indigenous perspectives and understandings of the past into our presentations of the past at a museum like ours. And this is a challenge we truly embrace and are excited about. And it's brought us to these fruitful places of being able to ask new and different questions. So we try to work very closely. One of the things that I have to say I take great pride in is that when we did an exhibition on women's history just before the pandemic in 2019 called Pathfounders Women of Plymouth. And we brought equal attention to the stories of both English colonial women and Wampanoag women in the early colony. All of our interactive content was created for us by an Indigenous-owned production company, Smoke Signals, and that is owned by Wampanoag tribal members Stephen Peters and Paula Peters, who I know you also have worked with on many projects at NEHTS and American Ancestors, and they are just tremendously. It just was, it's really revivifying for us in a way to be able to have these relationships and to work with Indigenous colleagues in the work of doing the history that we do.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and echo your words on smoke signals and Paula and Stephen Peters, who do such great work, and we've learned so much from them, and I feel just exactly the same way. Last year in December, you were very kindly honored me and some of my colleagues with a special award, and here it is. It's the Bradford Award, and it's absolutely beautiful, and you'll have to tell the story of this wonderful carving. I was honored along with several others, including two very close colleagues, Bruce Bartlett, who's been a trustee of yours and a trustee at American Ancestors New England Historic Genealogical Society, and who's done so many great things to advance American history generally. And Michelle Pecoraro, of course, the immediate past executive director of Plymouth 400, and others. And it was truly a great honor. And maybe you'd say a little something about the work you do with the Bradford Award and other types of recognition.
So the Bradford Award has been an honor that the museum has bestowed for about 20 years. And it was intended to honor individuals who have made significant advances in expanding public understandings of American history and culture. The first recipient was David McCullough, and other recipients have included Henry Louis Gates and Justice Stephen Breyer, Nathaniel Philbrick, and a number of others. But for this year, for 2020, when we gave it out at the end of last year, we were really thinking of sort of what had happened in 2020, 2021 with our own experiences of the pandemic and how that affected so many historical and cultural institutions and what the responses were of certain individuals to that. And we were inspired, and the award itself is partly based on something that William Bradford recorded in his journal when he was writing about how the Pilgrims were considering whether, or not they should leave the home that they had established for themselves as exiles in Leiden in Holland and take this next step to go across the Atlantic Ocean, a very perilous undertaking, and try to seek a new home in a very unfamiliar place here in the colonial world. And Bradford said, "All great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties and must be both enterprised and overcome with answerable courages." And we wanted to honor, during our own sort of period of great challenge in the pandemic, people who were able to further the work of history that we do and that we feel is very important in the lives of many people, both at a personal level, but also in the ways that we understand the world around us, that history does have an important role to play in that. And so your work, that you were not daunted by the pandemic, Brenton. You did tremendous work in furthering the work that American Ancestors and NEHGS does, as did Michelle Pecoraro under very trying circumstances for the Plymouth 400. And Bruce Bartlett supported a number of works, including the Massachusetts Chronicles, which is a very important publication that was co-authored by Wampanoag Aquinnah educator Linda Coombs again. So we also honored Linda with a separate award, a new award called the New Visions Award. And this is again thinking of ways to acknowledge the work of expanding the scope of our understanding, especially through the inclusion of Indigenous perspectives.
Well, you were very kind to do that, and it is my goodness, the company we're in is very lofty indeed. And I think one of the great things, one of the outcomes was that while a lot of the events we might have had were postponed or canceled, what I've said is that so much material was published, in our website, publishing all of the lineage papers for the Mayflower Society, publishing the 400th anniversary edition of William Bradford's Of Plymouth Plantation with the Colonial Society of Massachusetts as our co-publisher, including a brilliant foreword by Paula Peters, which gives a completely new perspective on the story. There were so many, in many ways, scholarship and education took the front seat during the pandemic. And so that to me is the silver lining, but I really thank you for it. And tell me about this beautiful carving.
Well, the carving is made according to traditional English furniture making techniques, and it was actually crafted by a local artisan who happens to be my husband, Ted Curtin. And he's made a number of pieces of furniture in various museum collections, reproductions, so people can have a chance to see what these things are like. But this is made from a beautiful piece of local oak, and he adzed it out from the tree trunk. And it is riven by hand and planed down and carved by hand with gouges and carefully finished. And if you take good care of it, Brenton, it should last you about 400 years.
Okay, well, I'll hope to be there for the 800th anniversary. We'll have to check on it then. But I really do treasure it, and it is a beautiful object, and the award means so much to me. And I have to say, all the more so because I descend 3 times over from William Bradford. So I'd like to think some of my history interests have come down from the 17th century. And speaking of this award, we have a little bit of film to show you now, which is a segment that occurred in December of 2021 when Sue Allen, the Mayflower Scholar in England, gave a beautiful introduction to the award. And then we have a little film that is retrospective of some of the activities that took place during the quadricentennial. So let's take a look at that now.
I remember when I first met Brenton, it was at Babworth, and he was part of a Mayflower tour. And I remember him almost leaping down from the coach and coming up to me and shaking my hands and saying how thrilled he was to meet me, and I didn't even know who he was. It was later at Austerfield. Brenton took me to one side and said he wanted to help me get my research out there. No one in England was interested in helping me with my research. For Brenton to say he wanted to get that research out to the people who would be interested in hearing it, and he wanted to do it quickly. He seems to have this can-do, very nurturing attitude. I'll never forget him for that. That means a lot. I cannot think of anyone more deserving of this Governor Bradford Award than Brenton. He's an honest, honourable person who strives for his community and to help honour those who came before, to bring out not just the history of early America, but also to put some flesh onto the bones of those early settlers. And I can only endorse the decision to give him this award.
Well, that was great to see that and have the happy memories of a very special occasion. And once again, thank you, Donna, and the Pilgrim Hall Museum and the Pilgrim Society for honoring me and others for our work. And it really, as I say, it just means the world to me, and I know it does to my fellow honorees as well. Tell me about are there any programs coming up in this summer or in the fall at Pilgrim Hall that our viewers might like to know about, whether in person or online?
So we are in conversations right now with our maritime researchers who plan on coming this summer. We're working on the date to do some further research that will take place in the public view on some of those sparrowhawk timbers. So you'll have to pay attention to pilgrimhall.org for the news about this. We're trying to put this together, most likely this June or early July. That will be taking place. And there will be some sort of presentation by Dr. Hawker of the Baza Museum at that time. But we are also doing some wonderful, both in person, and then we send them out digitally as video after the fact, tours of a wonderfully rich historic site here in Plymouth, Burial Hill. And there are many stories that we'll be sharing, both those that date back to the early history of the colony here, but also take the evolution of Plymouth history forward to later episodes. And those can be, people can attend if you want to come down and visit Plymouth for the day. You know, it's a wonderful day that they will be occurring through the summer, and you can find those dates on our website. And we're also looking forward in the fall to opening a new exhibition called Real/Mythic, revisiting early Plymouth from the Mayflower to the first Thanksgiving. And there will be some very special artifacts and materials on display that are not always in the public view.
What are your operating hours there at the museum if anyone wishes to visit?
We are open Wednesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and happy to welcome guests.
Great. Well, I encourage everyone in the American Ancestors family to consider visiting Plymouth generally, but the Pilgrim Hall Museum specifically. It is full of so many fascinating objects and beautiful portraits, which we didn't even get into that subject. There are just so many things to discover there. And Donna and her colleagues do an amazing job of interpreting history. And so thank you for the work you do. And I hope everyone will take advantage of visiting you at Pilgrim Hall Museum. And just give us your URL one more time.
It's pilgrimhall.org.
Okay, well, that's easy. Thank you so much for joining us, Donna, and thank you for watching this installment of Antiquarto. Bye-bye.